Hello, lovelies! You're listening to episode 70 of the Broken Enchantments podcast, written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. That's me. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Be sure to check out my Patreon for next week's episode, now available. You can check out the links below. Happy listening! It was late. Very late, but Janir couldn't sleep. She sat cross-legged in the middle of her feather bed, with the mosquito netting down, the incense lamps burning. Janir had never changed out of her dinner clothes, ignoring the nightgown laid out on the chair. Her eyes were swollen and red. Every part of her demanded sleep, but her mind wouldn't allow it. The same thoughts ran through her head over and over about the chalice, Brevia, her loved ones, the future she would never have. It was an unending refrain. Janir rubbed her eyes with one hand, listening to the chirping and croaking of the rainforest outside her window. The river rushed a steady hum, and the wind stirred. Janir wondered if Seovan and the others were managing to sleep. She was in a guest chamber and unable to rest. She hated to think what it must be like for them. She hoped they were more resilient. A low murmur punctuated the sounds of nature. Janir shot a sharp look to the door. Several voices exchanged words, incomprehensible from this side. A woman's voice wheedled, and two male voices replied. It went on for several minutes, with the occasional pause. Every so often, one word spoken louder than the others, but still not understandable. Janir frowned. It was a bit late for the servants to be coming by, or anyone for that matter. The doorknob turned, and a slim figure slipped in. Emilla had not made any attempts at disguise. She wore her full battle armor, the black scaled leather glistening in the lamplight, carcatan already drawn. With the coolness of a stalking wolf, Emilla grabbed a chair and rammed it against the door, wedging it shut. Janir opened her mouth, but before she could get a word out, Emilla hurled a carcatan. Leaping off the bed, Janir tumbled to the floor. Her own carcatan had been taken. The incense stand was too far away. She didn't have time for another thought. An instant later, Emilla lunged for her from behind. Emilla's second carcatan rammed into Janir's shoulder. Tendrils of pain stabbed through her veins, stinging, biting, burning. The explosive agony blurred Janir's vision, and a scream tore from her mouth. The carcatan's frenzied wail echoed through the whole room. Forcing herself to think, Janir slammed her elbow upwards and connected with Emilla's gut. The other woman doubled over for a moment. Though the rod didn't stop touching her, the pain lessened enough for Janir to twist out of the carcatan's touch and whirl to face her cousin. "Kinslayer!" Emilla snarled. She stabbed, carcatan aiming for Janir's chest. Janir reacted out of instinct and caught the carcatan by the wrong end. Instantly, the excruciating fire worked its way through her palm, up her wrist and forearm. Janir clenched her teeth to hold in a scream and gripped the rod tighter. Janir had been tortured with a carcatan before. She knew she was capable of withstanding the pain, even if it was hard to believe. She pushed back, fighting it even as she trembled. Emilla didn't try to pull the carcatan from Janir's grip. She just kept shoving, trying to drive it into her cousin's chest. Janir lashed out with everything she had, including that place between the physical and spiritual where her magic lived. Janir drove against the power of Emilla's carcatan, willing it back. The pain of the carcatan began to lessen. Janir kept shoving, kept ordering the rod's power out of her veins. Emilla's arm shook. She looked from Janir to the rod and back to Janir. "How are you doing that?" Janir didn't stop. She pushed, driving the magic straight back to Emilla. The veins on Emilla's hand and wrist began to darken. Emilla still didn't let go, though she flinched and her grip faltered. It seemed that she couldn't. The Carcatan stopped shrieking and began to vibrate, then shake. Soon it was nearly leaping between the two of them. There was a boom, like a clap of thunder, and Janir and Emilla were flung across the room in opposite directions. Janir slammed into the railing of the balcony, a good 30 feet. Her body impacted with the stone, the air rushed out of her lungs, and the promise of 1,000 bruises throbbed across her back. Her hand stung and ached in every way imaginable, and the sore on her shoulder oozed black through her tunic. She laid there in a heap. A small part of her was relieved. She was free from the blistering pain of Emilla's Carcatan. Yet her cousin was still coming. Emilla had been thrown into the wall, but she recovered. She staggered upright, spewing curses. Though her body pleaded for respite, Janir clawed back to her feet. She had no illusions about being able to take on her cousin in a fair fight, but she meant to last as long as she could. The door thudded as the guards outside tried to batter their way in. Shouts and clanking warned that reinforcements had already arrived. At Janir's back, the river gurgled below, and the occasional chirp of nocturnal rainforest creatures punctuated the stillness. A musty breeze toyed with her hair. All around her, outside the light of the oil lamps, the night was ruled by darkness. Janir gasped for breath as Emilla stalked toward her. "What will the Lord Argetallam do if you kill his firstborn?" Emilla's eyes were bloodshot with fury. Her mouth was drawn in a snarl of rage. She was not in a mind to be reasoned with. "Murdering a murderess is hardly a crime." She spat. "I didn't—" Emilla advanced, and Janir shrank back. The solid stone of the railing pressed against her lower spine. Realizing that she had run out of balcony, Janir took a chance and ducked under Emilla's next blow, rolling under it and wriggling out from between her cousin and the rail. Emilla whirled around, and her Carcatan stabbed into Janir's back, driving her to the ground. Janir choked down a scream. Her eyes filled with tears of pain, her body rammed against the stone, and she couldn't push herself up. Janir swept a kick at Emilla's legs. It wasn't enough to put her cousin on the ground, but it was enough for Janir to wrench out of her grasp again. A thud and flash of movement caught Janir's notice a moment before a shout followed. "Emilla!" Her cousin spared a glance for the intruder. Lucan leapt from the trellis that stretched between Janir's balcony and the one above it. Dusting ivy leaves from his clothes, he approached calmly, shooting a quick glance to Janir. "Emilla, you don't want to do this." Lucan was composed, serene. If it weren't for the muscle tightening in his cheek, one would have thought him perfectly at ease. "The Lord Argetallam has gone through great lengths to ensure the princess's survival. He will not be pleased if you destroy her." Emilla's nostrils flared and her knuckles went white on her Carcatan. "If justice holds no sway over the Lord Argetallam, I must take it for myself." Janir pressed against the rail, trying to distance herself as much as possible from her rabid would-be killer. Lucan came closer. The pounding on the door grew louder and louder as the Mortons on the other side grew more frantic. The door burst open and Cerilius, with at least a dozen other honor guards, swarmed through. Cerilius turned to Lucan, but the prince's face remained impassive. Cerilius neared, the two Argetallam women on the balcony, locked on Emilla. "Emilla?" He gaped. "How could you?" In a motion too quick for anyone to react, Emilla spun like a wild thing and shoved Janir as hard as she could. Janir tried to stop and clawed helplessly at air. "No!" Cerilius lunged, but he was too late. Janir jolted over the balcony railing to the river below. Fingernails clawed over her arm and latched onto her wrist. A scream tore through the air, and it took a moment for Janir to realize it was hers. Janir jerked to a halt, suspended over the rocky foundation of the temple and the rushing river below. She didn't know who had caught her, and it never occurred to her to wonder. She clawed and kicked at the stone below the railing, trying to find purchase on the slippery rock. Someone shouted. There was a flurry of arguing and protests above the roar of the river. Janir started, slipping out of her rescuer's grip despite her best efforts to hang on. Her palm was sweaty, and his was no better, and she wasn't strong enough. Before she could lose her grip, the hand holding her gave a sudden jerk forward. The next thing Janir knew, she was tumbling towards the river, the flailing shape of her rescuer following. You have been listening to Broken Enchantments, written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. Don't forget to check out my Patreon for early access to episodes, bonus content, and lots of patrons-only freebies. You can learn more at elizabethwheatley.com. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. I'll see you next time.